So recently I watched True Detective Season 1, and without doubt it is top 3 of seasons or television shows that I've seen. And today I'm going to recap some of the show. So let's jump right into it, and spoiler warning ahead. So in the pilot episode we begin in 1995. Two detectives in the state of Louisiana, Rustin Cohle and Martin Hart, investigate the scene of a ritualistic murder of a lady of the night named Dora Lang. Cohle believes this is not the killer's first, and further research brings them to the case of Maria Fontenot, who disappeared in 1990. They pick up the investigation and look into the reports of a sketch of a green-eyed spaghetti monster, which at first they don't really know what to make of. And Hart invites Cohle over for dinner, and it turns out this is the anniversary of the death of Cole's daughter. And he turns up and is drunk and is a bit of a mess. And then towards the end of the episode, they go to Marie's uncle Denny and go out to this playhouse and find this kind of twig ritual thing that is quite prominent in the show. And another thing with the show is it's non-linear, it's kind of jumping around. So then in 2012, Cohle and Hart are being interviewed by two detectives because of a recent murder in Lake Charles. They are separately re-interviewed about the Dora Lang case. Cohle showed the new victim posed exactly like Lang. The detectives kind of question what's going on. So then, and it's quite obvious, like Woody Harrelson, Matthew McConaughey are just such good actors, they just kill it. And Cohle is kind of this nihilistic character who's just gone like, whatever, just trying to solve everything. And Hart is, I'd say the only element of comedy of the show is Woody with some replies to whatever Cohle is saying. Like, Cohle would just say something and Hart would just go like, what the hell are you saying? Because it is a pretty dark show all in all. So on to episode 2, in 1995, they pursued the Dora Lang case and discovered she was attending a rural church. And then Cohle realised Marty's having an affair, this employee at the court or whatever. And then there's kind of this thing where this reverend comes in with a task force to try and shut down this Lang case, which will become important later. And Cohle is like disgusted, he just thinks it's rubbish. Which is this Tuttle guy, he has lots of power in the state of Louisiana. So the higher ups really, they give them a deadline to try and get a lead, so they're really under pressure. So then a lead kind of brings them to this kind of trailer park full of young women, and they kind of do interviews. They find a diary and locate this church. And then they find this painting of like a horned woman on the wall, and it's pretty chilling stuff, to be honest. So in 2012, they're still interviewing them, and Cohle is drinking beer, and they kind of just recap their lives at the time and some of their life stories. So Marty kind of goes through his divorce, fall in marriage. Cohle kind of recaps what happened with his daughter, collapse of family and his descent into addiction. And then he reveals that he was undercover with biker gangs for years, which is classified. They didn't know that. And then he landed up in a psychiatric hospital, so that's kind of what went down with him. Then upon release, he joined Marty in Louisiana. He kind of just said, looking for work in Louisiana is where it's at. So yeah, on to episode 3. Hart and Cole kind of turn up with this preacher, and it's a real southern scene of the preacher just yapping and everyone just watching, and they interview him after, and this is where they first learn of the tall man with scars, who is very important, as we'll find out. They learn Lang was often seen with this man. Pressure mounts to hand over the case to this task force of Tuttles, so they need to find the lead. And then Marty tries to reconnect with Maggie and this girl he was having an affair with previously. He finds out that she's with another guy, and he just follows her home and just beats him up. So he's a mess at this point. Because in the first episode you think Cole's crazy, Hart's stable, but then you find out it's not that way, not one bit. So Russ kind of dives into old cases, uncovers the death of Rianne Olivier, and he finds she attended Light of the Way, a school owned by Tuttle, for running off at Reggie Ledoux. So, bit of backstory on this. The Tuttles are a family that have been in the state of Louisiana, in this universe, for hundreds of years. They have lots of branches set down, loads of schools, foundations set up, and one of these is Light of the Way. And he goes to the school and chats with a guy in a lawnmower who just kind of says generic stuff, doesn't give anything away. And then this man turns out to be quite important. And then Marty beeps to get back in the car because they have a lead in Ledoux. And Len Ledoux becomes the prime suspect. So into 2012, the interviews continue. Marty's hypocrisy is kind of apparent. He's quite an arrogant person. He's just like calling out other people and doesn't really take that much responsibility early on these interviews. And Rust is very nihilistic early in the show. These interviews, he just kind of, I don't really know how to describe it. He just yaps on about stuff, and the detectives are looking at each other like, what is this guy saying, kind of. And then the interviews do give a good idea of how Cole and Hart are very flawed, but Cole is more aware of it, whereas Hart is not. He still thinks of himself as perfect, and it does raise a bit of a question. Was the true killer caught in 1995? That is the big question. So, on to episode 4. In 1995, they go to prison to interview Charlie Lang, who gives them the name Tyrone Weem, and describes Reggie Ledoux' tales of this secret group, this cult, sacrifice of women and children for satanic, whatever, not good stuff. And then there's like this underground rave. Marty goes in and tracks down Weem and gets the name of a biker gang Ledoux used to link up with, the Iron Crusaders in Texas. So with this lead, Rust takes some sick leave, saying he's going to visit his dad, but he's really going undercover because in the past he just said that he didn't die, he just got injured in a past shootout. So his cover is still there with this biker gang. They still see him as this guy called Crash, and he infiltrates them again. He goes and he swaps out some cocaine to bring to this guy Ginger, this high-ranking biker, and Ginger kind of gets in there, and Russ builds some trust up with Ginger as this guy Crash, and he knows the mannerisms. He was doing some prep to make himself look like a drug addict to really get back into the undercover mode. And so Ginger says to prove himself, Cole needs to come out and get the stash house raid with him. And Cole is pretty dedicated to the case and just goes and does it. So you have to respect. And then they go to like this project, which is primarily full of African American citizens, and it's carnage. Like they shoot people, it's just mayhem, and then they escape. And then Cole holds Ginger at gunpoint, gets Martin, who's followed them on the radio, and Martin picks him up. And then we do reveal that Lisa is this girl Hart was with earlier in the series. She calls Maggie, and Maggie leaves. Marty returns home to the house with a letter and turns up at her hospital and is just annoyed and just a mess, you know. So back in 2012, these interviews, Papania and Gilbo focus in on this sick leave during the Iron Crusaders raid, and they say there's no records of your dad being sick, and Cole is kind of under pressure, and they're kind of they think Cole didn't use a lot of above board methods, and they're not really a fan of him in general, it has to be said. And their credibility is kind of under scrutiny, you know. But they both stick to the same plan. And these detectives, they don't really have anything concrete, it has to be said. So those first 4 episodes, I would say the first few episodes kind of give you, the first episode is fantastic. It gives you a good introduction to these two characters, the concept that we're in 1995, 2012, and we kind of know something has happened in between. And it's referenced that there's a fallout in 2002 between the two men. And we're kind of just going in between without knowing a whole lot about 2012, why they're back here, what they're doing exactly. And it has to be said that the cast of this thing is exceptional. The setting, the camera work, the filmmaking of this Louisiana kind of swamps, South Louisiana setting. It kind of feels like a period piece wherever they are. It's very good. So that is episode 1 to 4. So in those first 4 episodes, Hart and Cole do a lot of grunt work, gritty detective work, grinding, getting little bits of information, going around conducting interviews, and in episode 5, they kind of have more concrete stuff. So Ginger and Undercover Crash meet DeWall Ledo in a roadside bar. DeWall is very hostile and just leaves. So Hart tails DeWall to a hidden meth lab deep in the Bayou kind of forest. Cole guides them, and Cole kind of gets them through booby traps, tripwires, find this lab complex thing, and discover 2 kids who are suffering. One is dead, one is very sick. Hart is obviously enraged with hatred for Ledoux. Loses composure a bit. He should arrest Ledoux, but he just goes and kills him. DeWall panics and runs away. He goes on a mine and just blows up and dies. And it's kind of funny how they just make up the story. They're quite convincing. They're just like, oh, it's chaos. But really, they just executed Reggie Ledoux and the other guy died. And Cole sprays the yard with a big gun, an AK, to stage a shootout, to leave the shells, make it credible. So, and then they return and are hailed as heroes, or promotions, and it's all whoop-de-doo. And it's clear that Cole, we kind of, in this episode, there's 95, there's 02, and there's 12 in terms of the time zones. Hart is back with Maggie. Cole is dating a physician, and it's clear that he isn't 100% sure. And he's brought into a structured confession from a guy named Francis. And he gets to the confession, and then this killer says, I know about the Yellow King, that Ledoux wasn't the true killer. And this sets off a fire in Cole. And then, very suspiciously, this guy Francis receives a call and then ends his own life. And Cole is like, what's going on here? Pretty suspicious. He goes back to another religious school and discovers all of these, the symbiology, this stick stuff, and his mind begins racing. He thinks Ledoux and Ewald weren't the only people part of this thing. And then in 2012, Papania and Guilbeault, they begin framing that they think Cole was part of this, that Cole led them to every lead, which is a bit too good to be true. They see Cole at the recent Lake Charles murder, and this Reverend Tuttle is dead, and they think Cole's part of it. And then Cole is just like, you don't know what you're doing, and just says, get a warrant for his storage shed. It just gets out. And then Hart is pressed about the 2002 fallout and his loyalties, basically, and these detectives. It's clear that these detectives aren't part of this cover-up, so to speak, but they're just being directed possibly by higher-ups. Then episode 6, we're in 2002. Cole kind of goes on a solo, independent search. Seeks out the past preacher, talks about Wellspring, this foundation, and the preacher reveals there was some not good stuff going on with kids, and Cole kind of is pretty certain now that there's a big cover-up going on at the state of Louisiana. He visits Kelly, who was the survivor of the Ledoux camp, and she's in a kind of mental state of despair, but she does give crucial information talking about the tall scarred man. And then Cole goes to visit this Reverend Billy Tuttle, saying he's just interested in this Wellspring project. And then it becomes clear to Tuttle that Cole is onto him, so Tuttle complains. And Cole was told to stop because there is a kind of cover-up going on. And he was told to stop and doesn't, because he knows something's going on. And then Marty starts an affair with Beth, who was a former girl he knew from the case. Maggie discovers the further infidelity, and then is just a mess herself. She goes over and seduces Russ and kind of goes on to him, and it's just chaos. She then tells Marty that she was with Russ, and so Marty then attacks Cole in the car park, and then they have this interview, and Cole just has enough of working for the Louisiana State Police because he knows he's fighting Everest, trying to do the right thing, and just resigns. So back in 2012, Papania and Guilbeault, they're interviewing Maggie. She dismisses any wrongdoing by Cole and thinks he's a good man, and denies that he caused the divorce. And then Marty just walks out when they bring up that they think Cole murdered Tuttle and was part of these killings. Marty's just like, just no. And then at the end, Marty's driving and is pulled over by a big red pickup, which we become familiar with as Russ Van, and says, do you want to get a beer? Which basically, do you want to help me out? Because in episode 7, in 2012, Cole provokes Hart by saying, "We have a debt to stop this scarred killer," brings him to his storage unit full of evidence and research. And so he broke into Tuttle's home using expertise from past breaking and entering police work, and found the safe and found videos and photos of proof of this cult. And they just wear all these weird costumes, and we see the death of Marie Fontenot, and says he didn't kill Tuttle. So, but Tuttle was killed. He believes that when this stuff was found stolen from Tuttle's, basically the organization were like, "You gotta go," basically. And then they kind of go to this guy, another Ledoux, who's nothing to do with this, but it is related to them. He's hanging out with Ledoux and Duval, and he said he knew the Scarface man, and basically says he's a weirdo and is looking at me weird. So he further confirms this guy is weird, scar, tall, he's our man. So they use Marty's skills as a people person. He goes back to his former boss, Garachi. They play golf, then they go fishing. But Hart now knows that for certain that this thing is real and that there's more than just the two Ledoux. So he's in helping Rust. And while Garachi wasn't directly involved, he was directed to cover up the Fontenot thing from this guy, Sheriff Tel Childress. And they force a confession on this boat because Rust is there too. And they're really making good progress with this thing. And then I think it's a big help for Rust because Marty has a PI firm, private investigation, and has access to lots of resources. He has offices, computers, he has friends in the force, he can get files. And he's like everyone, Rust doesn't really have any friends, so he couldn't get those resources, whereas Marty can, and with those resources they can really begin making solid progress on this thing. And then Papani and Gilbo, they're just chasing this church lead. They ask directions from the tall scarred man, landscaper, and he stands up and it's clear this is our man. So onto the finale. We begin with this man, Errol Childress. It's kind of just into his world. He lives in this big house, old house. He keeps his dad's corpse in a shed. He kind of has this half-sister and there's all sorts of weird stuff going on there. He just kind of yapping in various accents. English accent, Irish accent. He's painting a school building and then he's kind of looking at these kids playing in a weird way. Obviously reinforcing that he is our scarred killer. And then they kind of, Cole and Hart do know from Garachi that Sheriff Childress covered up this disappearance. And then the biggest breakthrough I think of the whole show is Marty realizing, thinking of the greenhouse they visited, newly painted, and the green-eared spaghetti monster, that perhaps is green paint because he was painting this house. And they found this business called Childress and Sons and discovered this man, Errol Childress, is tied to this cult. And basically they visit this house Cole knows pretty much straight away this is it. He basically says to get Papania because they were linking up with him, because Papania is beginning to believe something what Cole and Hart were saying. And essentially Marty goes up and the woman answers the door, and it's clear she's hostile and a bit crazy. And Kripke drops the pretense that he's looking for historical research or something like that, and busts in, looks around, finds all the proof. There's no doubt now this is where it's at. And it's unclear, phone is mentioned, but it's insinuated that Marty got her to reveal the phone and that he called Papania. And then Cole sees Childress and is like, get on your knees or hands up or whatever, and he's just like no, and runs away to this place Carcosa, which is a big kind of castle-y maze thing in the woods, which is like basically the base for all this weird cult stuff that's been going on for so long. And Cole is going around and Childress is kind of saying stuff, and it's so intense. It's one of the most intense scenes I can remember. And Cole has a hallucination, which he's prone to do because of the drugs. And then Childress comes in, stabs Cole, lifts him up. But Cole, it's clear, is very adept at combat and headbutts Childress. He drops Cole. Hart comes in and shoots Childress, but then Childress hurls an axe at Hart. He's about to kill Hart, but then, as you know, Rust has a high level of physical durability. Someone gets the gun and kills Childress. And then Papania Gilbo arrive. They find Hart and Cole, and they basically find this chaotic scene. And up to the finale, I was quite worried that one of Rust or Marty would die. So I was relieved to find we do find out they both survive and they took out Childress. Because I just didn't want Childress to get away with it. So both detectives are recovering in hospital, Lafayette Hospital, and they get out. And I think Cole is so overjoyed. We see on the news that there's no, other than Childress, they say there's no link. But he knows that in the future, Carcosa has been found. This probably isn't going to happen again. He's just relieved that he stopped Childress. He just exposed the whole thing, that it's not going to happen again in the future. And he says, well, he has no faith throughout the show. He says that he senses his dead daughter's presence while comatose. And he's just optimistic about life. And they talk about the light in the dark, and he says, once there's only dark, you ask me, the light's winning. So he's positive now about life. Because really, from the moment he meets Francis, who mentions the Yellow King, up until Childress is dead, this whole case consumed his life. Completely and utterly. So I really think it was a good ending. I wouldn't happy ending, but they're both alive and they stopped Childress. So, thank you for watching that recap of True Detective Season 1. And, see ya.